Have you ever stopped to wonder what truly defines a successful life at 80? Is it perfect health? A sharp mind? A loving family by your side? You might be surprised. It's not always what you think. In fact, one of the biggest signs of success at this age is something most people overlook. Stay with me because what I'm about to share might just change how you see aging forever. When we think about success in our later years, most of us picture good health, clear thinking, and close relationships. And while those are important, they're just part of the story. The real secret? It's something far simpler, yet far more powerful: independence. But here's the twist. It's not just about taking care of yourself physically. It's about staying in control of your life, your choices, and your happiness. Imagine this. You wake up in the morning and without thinking twice, you get out of bed, make your own breakfast, maybe even take a walk outside. These simple tasks might seem small, but at 80, they're huge victories. They mean you're still steering your own ship. And that's a feeling money, fame, or even perfect health can't replace. But what happens when that independence starts to slip away? When you have to rely on others for the things you once did without a second thought. That's when many people begin to feel like they're losing more than just physical ability. They feel like they're losing themselves. The sense of being a burden, even if your family never says it out loud, can weigh heavily on your heart. Have you ever felt that way or seen a loved one struggle with that? It's one of the hardest parts of aging, and it's something we don't talk about enough. Now here's where it gets interesting. You might think the key to holding on to your independence is just staying physically active, eating right, exercising, and all that. And while that's part of it, it's not the whole picture. In fact, I'm going to argue that your mind plays an even bigger role. Because here's the truth. You can be in great shape, but if your mind isn't sharp, making decisions and staying engaged in life becomes a real challenge. Think about people you know who are physically healthy but feel lost because they've stopped challenging their minds. Maybe they've given up hobbies they loved, stopped learning new things, or even pulled away from social connections. When that mental spark fades, life can start to feel smaller and more isolated, no matter how strong your body is. Let me tell you a quick story. My neighbor, Mr. Harris, is 85. He's not the fittest guy on the block. His knees aren't what they used to be, and he moves a bit slower these days. But every morning, you'll find him at the park, sitting on a bench with a newspaper, striking up conversations with anyone who passes by. He's curious, engaged, and full of stories. His mind is alive, and because of that, he's living a fuller, richer life than some people half his age. That's what mental clarity can do. It keeps life vibrant even when your body starts to slow down. But let's not forget the third piece of the puzzle: relationships. Now, this is where things get tricky, and here's the plot twist I promised. You might think having a spouse or family around automatically means happiness, but that's not always the case. In fact, some of the loneliest people I've met are those surrounded by family but feeling disconnected. What? Because being with someone isn't the same as truly connecting. At 80, it's easy to fall into routines with your spouse. Maybe you've been together for decades and the little things start to get on your nerves. Old arguments resurface, or you stop appreciating each other the way you used to. But here's the truth no one tells you. A long marriage doesn't guarantee a happy one. You have to work at it even more as you age. And sometimes finding happiness means letting go of old grudges, even when it's hard. Let me ask you, when was the last time you really listened to your partner, not just out of habit, but with curiosity, like when you first met? Or shared a laugh over something silly? These small moments can breathe new life into a relationship, no matter how many years you've been together. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about living longer, it's about living better with people who make your heart feel full. So, if you can still care for your body, keep your mind sharp, and find joy in your relationships at 80, you're not just surviving, you're thriving. But here's the big question. Which of these do you think is the hardest to maintain as we age? Your body, your mind, or your relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. When we think about aging well, the first thing that comes to mind is physical health. If I stay active and eat right, I'll be fine, right? But here's where things get interesting. It's not that simple. You might be surprised to hear that physical health is only part of the equation, and sometimes even the healthiest habits aren't enough to guarantee a fulfilling life at 80. Let's start with the basics. Yes, moving your body is crucial. But when we talk about taking care of ourselves, it's not just about how much you move, it's about how you feel while doing it. The truth is, the attitude you bring to your physical health matters just as much as the routines themselves. Take Mrs. Evans, for example. She's 82 years old and has never set foot in a gym. Every evening, she enjoys a glass of red wine and a piece of chocolate. She doesn't stress over calories, she doesn't count steps on a fitness tracker, and she doesn't obsess over her weight. But here's the surprising part. She's full of energy, moves around with ease, and radiates positivity. Now, compare her to her friend Joan, who's the complete opposite. Joan followed every health trend imaginable: green smoothies, daily yoga, no sugar, no processed foods. She exercised religiously and avoided anything she considered unhealthy. But despite all of that, Joan started experiencing chronic fatigue and joint pain in her late 70s. She was frustrated and confused. "I did everything right," she'd say. "Why am I feeling this way?" So what's the difference between Mrs. Evans and Joan? It wasn't just their habits, it was their mindsets. Mrs. Evans enjoyed life without guilt. She found joy in the little things, laughed often, and didn't let stress weigh her down. Joan, on the other hand, was constantly worried about doing everything perfectly. Every meal, every workout, every health decision felt like a test she couldn't afford to fail. And that constant stress? It took a toll on her body in ways no diet or exercise routine could fix. Here's the twist. We often focus so much on physical activity and nutrition that we overlook one of the biggest factors in aging: stress. You can eat all the kale in the world, but if you're constantly anxious, your body will feel it. Stress triggers inflammation, weakens the immune system, and accelerates aging. So while physical activity and healthy eating are important, they're only part of the picture. Your emotional well-being is just as crucial. Now, let's talk about something even more controversial: over-exercising. Yes, you heard that right. Many people believe that pushing themselves harder will keep them younger longer. But the truth is, too much exercise can be just as harmful as too little. Meet Henry, 78, who prided himself on staying active. He ran every day, lifted weights, and kept up with younger guys at the gym. But a few years ago, Henry started experiencing severe knee and back pain. His joints were worn out, and his doctor told him to slow down. But Henry didn't listen. He was convinced that staying active meant never stopping. Eventually, the pain became too much, and he had to undergo knee replacement surgery. Here's what Henry realized too late: aging bodies need different kinds of care. High-intensity workouts that worked in your 40s or 50s can do more harm than good in your 70s and 80s. Gentle movement, like walking, stretching, swimming, or gardening, can be far more beneficial than pushing your body to its limits. So, if you're someone who believes that more exercise is always better, I challenge you to rethink that. Balance is key. It's not about how hard you push, it's about how well you listen to your body. But here's something that often gets overlooked when we talk about physical health: the ability to care for yourself in small, everyday ways. We don't always realize how much independence matters until it starts to slip away. Think about it: being able to get out of bed on your own, prepare your meals, or even just dress yourself without assistance. These might seem like simple tasks, but at 80, they're powerful symbols of independence. And that independence? It's not just practical, it's deeply tied to your sense of self-worth. I remember visiting my Uncle George in his late 80s. He wasn't running marathons or lifting weights, but every morning he insisted on making his own breakfast. It wasn't about the food, it was about the pride he felt in being able to care for himself. "As long as I can butter my own toast," he'd joke, "I'm doing just fine." Losing the ability to perform these tasks can feel like losing a part of yourself. It's not just about needing help, it's about the emotional weight that comes with it. No one wants to feel like a burden. But here's the thing: even if you do need help, it doesn't mean you've failed. Asking for support is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength and acceptance. So what's the real takeaway here? Taking care of your body isn't just about staying active or eating perfectly. It's about finding balance, reducing stress, and focusing on what brings you joy. It's about listening to your body's signals and honoring them, rather than pushing yourself to meet unrealistic expectations. Let me ask you this: Do you believe that stress plays a bigger role in aging than diet and exercise? Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, but still felt off? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And remember, health isn't just about living longer. It's about living better. Whether that means enjoying a piece of chocolate, taking a leisurely walk, or simply finding peace in the present moment, your body will thank you for it. When people talk about aging gracefully, one of the first things they mention is keeping the mind sharp. You've probably heard it before: do puzzles, read books, play Sudoku, and you'll stay mentally fit. But here's where things take a turn. What if constantly staying busy isn't the best way to keep your mind clear? In fact, new research suggests that the constant push to stimulate your brain might actually do more harm than good. Sometimes, doing nothing at all is the most powerful thing you can do for your mind. Surprised? Let's dive into why that is. We live in a world that praises productivity. Even in retirement, people feel the pressure to stay busy. If you slow down, you'll lose it, they say. But let's flip that idea on its head. What if slowing down is exactly what your brain needs to stay sharp? Think about it. When was the last time you let yourself be bored? No TV, no phone, no to-do list, just you and your thoughts. It sounds simple, but most of us don't give ourselves that kind of space. And that's where the magic happens. Meet Mr. Clark, 84 years old. He's not into puzzles or brain games. Instead, he spends his mornings sitting on his porch, watching the sunrise and letting his thoughts drift. No schedule, no mental workouts, just quiet reflection. But here's the twist. His memory is sharp, his conversations are thoughtful, and he's one of the most insightful people in the neighborhood. When I asked him his secret, he smiled and said, "I give my mind space to breathe." Contrast that with Helen, who's 79 and prides herself on being busy. Every hour of her day is packed. Morning crossword puzzles, afternoon book clubs, evening trivia games. She never stops. But lately she's been feeling overwhelmed, forgetful, and mentally exhausted. "I'm doing everything I'm supposed to," she told me, "but I still feel foggy." So what's happening here? The simple: your brain, like your body, needs rest. Constant stimulation can lead to mental fatigue, just like over-exercising can wear out your muscles. Now you might be wondering, how can doing nothing be good for my brain? It all comes down to something scientists call the default mode network, DMN. This is the part of your brain that activates when you're at rest, not focused on any specific task. It's when your brain processes information, makes connections, and even solves problems in the background. Ever had a great idea pop into your head while taking a shower or going for a walk? That's your default mode network at work. When you're constantly busy, your brain doesn't get the downtime it needs to engage in this important process. But when you slow down, give yourself space, and allow your thoughts to wander, your brain starts to connect the dots in ways it can't when you're always on. While puzzles and brain games have their benefits, mindfulness and meditation might be even more powerful tools for maintaining mental clarity. Let's take Tom, for example. At 81, he started practicing mindfulness. Not complicated meditation techniques, just simple breathing exercises and paying attention to the present moment. Over time, he noticed a huge shift. He felt calmer, more focused, and even his memory improved. "I thought I needed to do more to stay sharp," he told me, "but it turns out I just needed to slow down and be present." Mindfulness reduces stress, and as we talked about earlier, stress is a major factor in aging. A calm mind is a clear mind. So instead of constantly trying to work out your brain, what if you gave it space to relax and reset? Now, here's a controversial thought. Social interaction might be even more powerful than any brain game. That's right. Having meaningful conversations, sharing stories, and staying connected with others stimulates parts of the brain that puzzles never touch. Take Betty and Sam, a couple in their early 80s. They host weekly dinners with friends and family, and their house is always filled with laughter and lively conversation. They don't bother with crosswords or brain apps, but their minds are sharp as ever. What? Because human connection is one of the best brain boosters out there. In fact, loneliness and social isolation have been linked to cognitive decline in older adults. Being around people, engaging in conversations, and feeling emotionally connected can slow down memory loss and even reduce the risk of dementia. So, next time you're choosing between another puzzle or calling a friend, consider this. A good conversation might be better for your brain than any Sudoku puzzle. Here's the part that might stir some debate. Are we overcomplicating mental health? We're bombarded with advice. Do this puzzle, take that supplement, follow this brain training program. But what if the answer is much simpler? What if all you really need is rest for your brain to process and rejuvenate, mindfulness to reduce stress and stay present, and connection to keep your mind engaged and emotionally fulfilled? You don't need the latest brain game or complicated routines. Sometimes the simplest practices are the most powerful. At the end of the day, how you approach aging mentally is just as important as the activities you do. If you see aging as a slow decline, you're more likely to feel discouraged and disengaged. But if you view it as a new chapter, a time to learn, grow, and connect, you'll naturally stay more mentally active. Look at George, 85, who decided to learn how to play the piano in his 80s. Why not? He said. It's something I've always wanted to do. Learning new things, even later in life, isn't just about keeping your brain sharp, it's about keeping your spirit alive. So, let me ask you, do you think we're putting too much pressure on ourselves to stay busy in order to keep our minds sharp? Do you believe that slowing down, being mindful, and connecting with others might be just as important as traditional brain exercises? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you're keeping your mind clear and engaged. And who knows, your story might inspire someone else who's watching. Remember, it's not about doing more. It's about doing what brings you peace, joy, and connection. That's the real key to staying sharp at any age. We've talked about the importance of taking care of your body and keeping your mind sharp, but there's one more piece to this puzzle that might surprise you. When people think about happiness in their later years, they often assume that having a spouse by your side guarantees a joyful life. But here's the plot twist. Love alone isn't enough to keep a marriage happy at 80. In fact, some of the longest marriages I've seen are also the most miserable. I know that might sound harsh, but let's be honest. After decades together, even the strongest relationships can hit rough patches. Time doesn't automatically make things better. Sometimes, it magnifies the small problems that were easy to overlook when you were younger. That's why, if you want to stay truly happy with your spouse in your later years, you need more than just love. You need communication, forgiveness, and a willingness to adapt. Let's take a look at Frank and Martha, who have been married for 55 years. To everyone around them, they look like the perfect couple. They've raised a family together, traveled the world, and never separated. But if you were to step inside their home, you'd see a very different picture. Frank and Martha barely speak to each other. When they do, it's usually to argue about something small: who left the lights on, whose turn it is to cook dinner, or why one of them forgot to pick up the mail. The love is still there, buried deep under years of unspoken frustrations, but they've lost the ability to connect. They're living under the same roof, but emotionally they're miles apart. Now, contrast that with Tom and Linda, who have been married for 30 years. They haven't been together as long as Frank and Martha, but their relationship is full of life and laughter. What's their secret? It's not that they never argue. In fact, they argue a lot. But they've learned that fighting isn't the enemy, silence is. When something bothers them, they talk about it. They don't let resentment build up, and they're quick to forgive. This openness keeps their relationship fresh and honest even after all these years. Here's where things get controversial. A little bit of arguing might actually be healthier for your marriage than avoiding conflict altogether. We've been taught to think that a perfect marriage is one without any fights, but that's just not true. Conflict shows that you care enough to engage with each other. It means you're invested in the relationship and willing to work through your differences. The real danger comes when couples stop fighting because they've given up on trying to connect. But it's not just about arguing or avoiding arguments. It's about finding joy in the small moments. After all, it's easy to get caught up in the routine of daily life, especially after so many years together. You wake up, have breakfast, watch TV, go to bed, and do it all over again. But true intimacy isn't found in the big, dramatic gestures. It's in those quiet, everyday moments. Sharing a morning coffee, taking a walk together, or laughing over a silly joke. These small interactions build a deep, lasting connection. Take Betty and George, for example. They've been married for over 60 years, and when you see them together, you can feel the warmth between them. Every morning, George makes Betty a cup of tea and they sit by the window talking about their plans for the day, even if those plans are just watering the garden or reading a book. It's a simple routine, but it's their time to connect and it keeps their bond strong. But even in the happiest marriages, there will be tough times. Health issues, financial stress, or the loss of friends and family can put a strain on any relationship. That's why one of the most important ingredients in a lasting, happy marriage is forgiveness. After decades together, it's natural for frustrations and disappointments to build up. Maybe your spouse forgot an important date, made a decision you didn't agree with, or just developed habits that get on your nerves. But holding on to those grievances only creates emotional distance. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Forgiveness isn't just for the big mistakes, it's for the little ones too. It's easy to let small annoyances pile up until they feel like big problems. But by practicing forgiveness daily, you create space for love to grow. Every time you let go of a grudge, you're choosing to prioritize your relationship over your pride. Now, I know some people will argue that forgiveness isn't always easy or even possible. And that's true. Some issues run deep and it takes time to heal. But here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that your partner is human just like you. They'll make mistakes just like you will. But when you choose to forgive, you're giving both of you the chance to move forward and continue building a life together. But let's address the elephant in the room. What if the person you're married to isn't the same person you fell in love with? This is a tough one, and it's something many couples face as they grow older. People change over time, and sometimes those changes create distance in a relationship. But here's the controversial idea. It's not about trying to get back to who you were. It's about learning to love who you've become. Think about it. You're not the same person you were in your 20s, and neither is your spouse. You've both grown, faced challenges, and experienced life in ways you couldn't have predicted. Instead of trying to hold on to the past, what if you embraced the present? What if you got curious about the person your spouse is today, just like you did when you first met? At the end of the day, staying happy in your marriage isn't about avoiding conflict or pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing to show up day after day with love, patience, and a willingness to connect. It's about finding joy in the small moments, forgiving the inevitable mistakes, and embracing the journey you're on together. So, let me ask you this. Do you believe that avoiding conflict makes for a happier marriage? Or do you think facing challenges head-on is healthier in the long run? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This is one of those topics that sparks a lot of debate, and I'm curious to see where you stand. And remember, it's never too late to strengthen your relationship. Whether you've been married for 5 years or 50, the choices you make today can bring new life and joy into your partnership. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about growing old together, it's about growing with each other. We've all heard it before. Stay active, eat right, and you'll stay healthy into your 80s. But here's the plot twist. That's not always true. I know people who followed every health rule in the book, yet they still faced unexpected illnesses. And then there are others who've lived their lives indulging in every so-called bad habit and are still kicking strong at 90. So what's really going on here? Take Mrs. Evans, for example. She's 82, has never stepped foot in a gym, and enjoys a glass of wine every single night. Her favorite treat? A nightly chocolate bar. But here's the surprising part. She's more energetic and lively than some people half her age. On the other hand, her friend Joan was a health fanatic. Green smoothies, yoga every morning, no sugar, no processed foods. Yet, Joan struggled with chronic fatigue and arthritis in her late 70s. So what's the difference? It's not just about what you do for your body, it's about how you feel while doing it. Stress plays a bigger role in aging than most people realize. You can eat all the kale you want, but if you're constantly anxious about every little thing, your health will suffer. Mrs. Evans? She enjoys her life without guilt. Joan? She's stressed over every calorie, every pound, every tiny health scare. That anxiety aged her faster than any cheeseburger ever could. And let's not forget about overexercising. Yes, you heard that right. Many people push their bodies too hard, thinking they're doing the right thing. But excessive strain on aging joints and muscles can lead to injuries, not longevity. Gentle. Movement like walking, stretching, or gardening can be more beneficial than high-intensity workouts. Now, I'm not saying you should throw away healthy habits, but maybe it's time to rethink how we define taking care of our bodies. The real secret? It's about balance. Moving enough to stay active, eating well enough to nourish yourself, but also allowing room for joy, indulgence, and most importantly, peace of mind. So, here's a question for you. Do you believe stress has a bigger impact on aging than diet and exercise? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see if you agree, or if you think I'm completely off the mark. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Do puzzles, crosswords, and brain games to keep your mind sharp. But here's where I'm going to challenge that idea. What if I told you that doing nothing might actually be better for your brain than constantly staying busy? Sounds strange, right? But hear me out. We live in a culture that glorifies productivity, even in retirement. Stay busy, they say. Keep your mind active. But recent studies suggest that periods of rest and even boredom are essential for maintaining mental clarity. When your brain has time to slow down, it processes information more effectively, sparks creativity, and helps you make better decisions. Think about it. How often do your best ideas come when you're staring out the window, taking a walk, or just sitting quietly with your thoughts? It's in those quiet moments that your brain does its deepest work, connecting ideas and making sense of the world. Yet, many people fill every minute with tasks, thinking that if they stop, their minds will deteriorate. Take Mr. Clark, for example. He's 84, and unlike his peers who swear by brain games, Mr. Clark spends his mornings just sitting on his porch, watching the birds, letting his thoughts drift. No puzzles, no constant stimulation. But here's the twist. His memory is sharp, his thinking is clear, and he's one of the most insightful people I know. He says the secret is simple. I give my mind space to breathe. Now I'm not saying you should ditch mental activities entirely. Reading, learning new skills, and engaging in hobbies are all fantastic for your brain. But constant stimulation without rest can actually lead to mental fatigue. It's about balance. Just like your body, your mind needs both exercise and recovery. And here's another controversial thought. Social connection might be even more powerful than any brain game. Conversations, sharing stories, and simply being around others stimulate parts of the brain that puzzles never touch. Emotional engagement, laughter, and human connection light up the brain in ways that no Sudoku puzzle ever will. So, here's my question for you. Do you think we're overcomplicating mental health by focusing too much on brain exercises and not enough on simple rest and connection? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to see where you stand on this. We've talked about the body and mind, but here's where things get really interesting. Relationships, especially with your spouse. You might think that after 50 or 60 years of marriage, happiness just comes naturally. But here's the plot twist. Love isn't always enough to keep a marriage happy in your 80s. In fact, some of the longest marriages I've seen are also the most miserable. Wait, what? How can that be? It's simple. Over time, many couples fall into routines. They stop seeing each other as individuals and start functioning more like roommates. The same old arguments come up, small annoyances grow into big resentments, and the spark that once brought them together starts to fade. And here's the hard truth. Staying married doesn't automatically mean you're happy. Take Frank and Martha. They've been married for 55 years. To everyone else, they're the perfect couple, always together, never divorced. But behind closed doors, they barely speak. Years of unspoken frustrations have created a wall between them. They love each other, sure, but they don't really like each other anymore. They're living under the same roof, but emotionally, they're miles apart. Now contrast that with Tom and Linda, who've only been married for 30 years but laugh like newlyweds. Their secret? They fight. Yep, you heard that right. They argue, they disagree, but they communicate. They don't let things simmer under the surface. They've learned that conflict isn't the enemy, silence is. By airing out their frustrations and forgiving each other, they've kept their connection alive. So, here's the controversial idea. A little bit of arguing might actually be healthier for your marriage than avoiding conflict altogether. It shows you care enough to work through problems rather than sweeping them under the rug. But it's not just about arguing or avoiding it. It's about finding joy in the small moments, sharing a morning coffee, taking a walk, or laughing over a silly joke. These little things keep the bond strong. And sometimes the biggest act of love isn't grand gestures, it's forgiveness. Letting go of past mistakes, even when it's hard, can breathe new life into a relationship. So, let me ask you, do you believe a happy marriage means avoiding conflict, or do you think facing it head-on is healthier? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I have a feeling this one might stir up some debate. So, we've talked about caring for your body, keeping your mind sharp, and nurturing your relationship with your spouse. But here's the surprising truth that ties it all together. You can do everything right and still face challenges. That's the part no one likes to admit. You can exercise, eat perfectly, keep your mind active, and maintain strong relationships, and life will still throw curveballs your way. And here's where the real plot twist comes in. Success at 80 isn't about avoiding struggles, it's about how you respond to them. Let me tell you about George. He was the picture of perfect aging, fit, mentally sharp, and happily married. But at 82, he suffered a stroke that changed everything. He lost much of his mobility and his speech was affected. You'd think that would break his spirit, right? But it didn't. George adapted. He learned new ways to communicate, found joy in smaller victories, and leaned on his wife, not as a burden, but as a partner. His life wasn't perfect, but it was still full of meaning and connection. Now contrast that with Susan, who was in excellent health, had a sharp mind, and a loving family, but she couldn't let go of the idea that aging shouldn't be hard. Every wrinkle, every ache, every small setback felt like a failure to her. She became bitter, focused on what she lost rather than what she still had. And despite having all the right pieces in place, she was deeply unhappy. So what's the difference between George and Susan? It's not just their circumstances, it's their mindset. George embraced the idea that aging comes with challenges, but those challenges don't define him. Susan resisted every sign of aging and it drained her joy. Here's the big takeaway. It's not about having a perfect body, mind, or marriage. It's about resilience, gratitude, and adaptability. The ability to find joy in the face of difficulty, to laugh even when life feels heavy, and to connect deeply with yourself and others. That's the real secret to thriving in your 80s and beyond. So now I turn it over to you. What do you think defines a successful life at 80? Is it physical health, mental sharpness, strong relationships, or something deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.